Okay, hi everybody. Welcome to Executive Functioning and Eating Disorders. Today we're going to spend a bit of time talking about the intersection between these two topics. My name's Minna. I use she and her pronouns. I'm the program manager at Sheena's Place. And I'm also a social worker who's been supervising some students that have been working with us. And your presenter today is actually going to be one of our students. Her name's Yuxuan. And I'm going to introduce her just in a moment. But she has been researching this topic and is looking forward to presenting some of the information she's found, as well as a couple tips and suggestions for resources and things that you can try if you are somebody who's struggling with the intersection between executive functioning and eating disorders. So a couple things before we start, just a reminder if you have been attending Sheena's Place groups with us before, this is a webinar, so it's a little bit different. We aren't going to be following any of our language guidelines, so you might find we're going into a little bit more detail than we usually do in a Sheena's Place group. Feel free to take care of yourself. So if you need to take breaks, get some comfortable objects nearby, that's completely okay. Um, and I will also hang around a little bit at the end if anybody is in distress. It's going to be recorded as well, like the recording has begun. So if you need to take a break and come back another time to look at the content, that's also totally okay. And again, yeah, with this, we're addressing this topic not necessarily as experts. Yuxuan's been working hard doing some research on the topic. But this is more of an introduction into the topic, and we'll also include some suggestions about where to go for extra support if you're relating to some of the issues that we're talking about. Okay, I'm going to pass it over to Yuxuan to introduce herself, and we'll get started. Go ahead, Yuxuan.
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Yuxuan. I'm a second year Master of Social Work student at U of T, and I am graduating this season. So I'm very glad to present this webinar with you and some research and some real life challenges and some possible skills that we can use. Okay, so we can just get started now, right?
Mhm.
Okay, so first, it will be a brief introduction of what is eating disorders. I think many of you already know that, but so we will keep it really brief. So, eating disorders are complex mental illness characterized by persistent disturbance in eating and eating-related behaviors that result in harm to one's physical health, mental health, or psychosocial functioning. Eating disorder behaviors may also be symptoms of malnourishment or starvation, and or can be a response to a difficult, stressful, or traumatic situation. And here we are phrasing the eating disorders as a spectrum here. So we're moving from a positive relationship with food and body to disordered eating symptoms and to eating disorders. So on one end, on the left end, we have a more positive and neutral relationship with food and the body. This can show up like positive or neutral body image, body acceptance, flexible, balanced, and intuitive eating and movements, and individuals who fall under this side usually see their self-esteem and self-worth not defined by their body and eating patterns. And in the middle, we have disordered eating symptoms. So someone may not meet criteria for a diagnosis, but these patterns can still have a significant impact on their relationship with food, with body, and their well-being. So this can include things like binge eating or purging that also include self-induced vomiting or over-exercising. And this can also show up like restricting food intake or preoccupation with food. And on the other end, we have the diagnosis, eating disorder diagnosis. So for today, we will mostly focus on the top three because that's where the research focus on. So first, it's binge eating disorder. This involves recurrent episode of binge eating and often with a sense of loss of control. And then for bulimia nervosa, this includes cycles of binge eating and followed by compensatory behaviors such as purging or overexercising. And then anorexia nervosa, this is characterized by restriction of food intake and an intense fear of weight gain and often a strong need for control. And as for avoidant restrictive food intake disorder, AFRID, we know that a lot of our participants at Sheena's place with AFRID also comorbid with neurodivergent challenges. So these are for eating disorder diagnosis that we mainly focus on today. Okay. And then we will give a brief introduction to executive function. What does executive function do? So this refers to a set of mental processes that help us manage everyday life, and these are skills that we rely on to plan, organize, and get things done. So that includes skills like helping us start tasks, planning, manage our time, organizing, and stay focused on longer term goals, and they also play a key role in regulating our emotions, especially in situations that feel very stressful or overwhelming. So in many ways, you can think of executive function as the system that helps us translate intentions into actions. And this will help us know what to do and drive us into actions. So from a brain perspective, these functions are largely supported by the prefrontal cortex, which is right here, which is located in the front part of our brain, and it's involved in decision making, planning, and self-regulation. So what does executive function do? There are three main executive functions. So first is working memory. It's the ability to hold information in mind and play with it. So just holding the information in mind, it's called short-term memory. It's not working memory. So working memory include a piece of playing with it and doing something with it. So second is cognitive flexibility. It's the ability to adapt to change, shift between tasks, think from different perspective, also change response to a changing environment, think about something in a whole new way, or take advantage of sudden opportunity. And then the third part is inhibition control, which includes thoughts, emotions, and focus. So a couple of abilities around that will be self-control, resisting temptation, thinking before speaking or acting, and curbing impulsivity. And it can also show up like staying on task despite setbacks or boredom, and delaying gratification. So what does it look like when things go wrong, when the systems are not working efficiently? The challenges can show up in very concrete and everyday ways. So it can look like we have a pile of laundry and we just cannot bring ourselves to wash or throw them into the washer, or we have dirty dishes in the sink and we know that we're running out of clean dishes, but we just cannot make ourselves do it. Or we could be always late for things and can't finish assignments on time and can't start doing our task, even though we know that they are super important and they're really close to the deadline. And it can also show up like difficulty prioritize the most important tasks. Also time blindness. It's when some individuals struggle to perceive and track time accurately, which can make it very difficult to plan or stay on schedule or complete tasks online even when they intend to do so. Okay, next part is about when we think about executive function difficulties, it's important to note that it's just do not come from just one place. It can show up in many different aspects. So one major category here is neurodivergence. For example, in in ADHD, people may experience challenges with starting tasks, managing time, or staying organized. And in ASD, difficulties often show up in flexibility and adapting to change. And also for learning disability, that can also affect how someone process and express information. Also, for mental health is another important factor, and this often works in two-way interaction. For example, depression can reduce energy and make it harder to initiate tasks, while anxiety can take up a lot of mental space through worry and make it harder to focus. And also, trauma and PTSD also impact planning and emotion regulation. We can also see executive function difficulties in context of substance use, as well as some brain-related conditions such as concussions, strokes, and other neurological conditions. When the areas of brain involve planning, attention, and regulation are damaged, that's when we see some executive function dysfunctions. And then we are getting to some ED and EF connections. We don't always use EF for abbreviation, but sometimes I feel like because executive function is a hard word to pronounce, I will sometimes use EF instead. Okay, so let's get to some research findings we have. So research journals has consistently find a strong association between eating disorder and executive function. So more recently, studies just suggesting that this relationship is likely to be bidirectional, meaning that they influence each other in both directions. So in this slide, I am focusing on one direction, which is how EF differences can influence the risk of developing or maintaining eating disorder behaviors. For example, cognitive rigidity or difficulty shift thinking. This can lead to strict food rules, or someone may feel the need to follow the routine in a very fixed way, which can reinforce restrictive patterns. And also difficulties with inhibition or impulse control that can often lead to binge eating or a sense of loss of control around food. And similarly, we have decision-making challenges that can lead people to prioritize short-term relief, such as binge eating, over long-term goals. It can also show up as action paralysis, which means people just freeze and don't act. There is also evidence that executive function difficulties in childhood may predict later eating disorder symptoms, and neurodivergency such as ADHD and ASD may increase vulnerability. So overall, executive function differences can shape how someone think, decide, and respond to urges, which can contribute to the development and maintenance of eating disorder. And on the next slide, we will talk about how ED symptoms lead to some EF challenges. So it's the impact pathway. So what we can see here is when our body is undernourished, it enter a kind of survival mode. So we consume less energy. That will reduce higher level cognitive functioning and reduce cognitive efficiency, which can make it even harder to think flexibly and make decisions. And it will also slow down attention and processing speed. Also, for emotional distress, it plays a big role as eating disorders are often associated with high level of anxiety, shame, or emotional overwhelm. And this can overload executive function capacity and make it harder to plan or focus or regulate emotion. And over time, repetitive eating disorder behaviors can also reinforce certain cognitive patterns. For example, rigid routines may strengthen inflexible thinking, while cycles like binge eating can reinforce impulsive responding. Another important factor is mental preoccupation. When someone is constantly thinking about food, body image or eating, it takes up a lot of cognitive space. So this creates a kind of brain overload, which can affect memory, decision, and attention. So the good news here is that some of these executive function challenges can improve with recovery, especially as nutrition stabilize and distress decrease. However, research also suggests that some difficulties may persist over time, which is why it's important to support both eating disorder recovery and executive function together. And then more research finding. Here are some general patterns that research have found across different eating disorder diagnoses. So, for example, in anorexia nervosa, we often see more cognitive rigidity and overcontrol. And in bulimia nervosa and binge eating, we see more of difficulties with inhibition control and planning and decision making, and especially when emotions feel challenged. And at the same time, it's important to keep in mind that these are just some general trends, not strict categories. So there is a lot of variabilities between individuals. And also, we can see that most of this research focus on these three more commonly studied diagnoses. Other eating disorder subtypes have less study, so we have less clear executive function profiles for them. But based on what we know and based on the fact that we can have multiple eating disorders or multiple ways of how disorder eating patterns show up, it's likely that similar EF challenges may still apply, especially considering shared features such as emotional distress, cognitive load, and behavioral patterns. And although there's a growing body of evidence linking eating disorder and executive function, the findings are not always consistent. We see that some studies show clear patterns, while others say they have mixed or inconclusive findings. And here, we can also see high comorbidity between eating disorder and conditions such as depression, anxiety, and this can have overlapping and compounding effects on executive function. So when they co-occur with depression, it can be associated with fatigue or energy loss or interest or pleasure loss or sleep problems or appetite changes and concentration difficulties. And when anxiety is related to eating disorder, it's often related to difficulty in shifting tasks and inhibition impairments. Okay.
Oh.
And then
Yeah,
maybe
I can
we'll
take
talk about, yeah.
I can take this, Yuxuan, if you want. Yeah, when we were doing this presentation, I thought it might be interesting to also look at what our Sheena's Place community is like when it comes to comorbidities. So I took a look at our some of our registration data. When people register for groups with us, we ask them if they have any comorbid conditions. And it's an optional question, but I had around 2,000 people had filled this out. And these are some of the percentages that I pulled. So around 37.7% of our participants identified with having an experience of depression. Around 42% identified an experience with anxiety, and around 20% identified with an experience or with ADHD and or autism. So that's quite a lot of people who likely have some kind of executive functioning challenge at the same time as experiencing an eating disorder.
Okay, so when ED and EF challenges meet, what are some challenges around eating can we experience? So from here we will talk about some experiences that we will have in real life. So it's possible that people get overwhelmed by steps needed to prepare food. thus frozen. So decision paralysis can result in choosing not to eat as it feels less overwhelming and then trying to figure out what to eat. Or this will also lead to binge eating and possible purging afterwards. And this can reinforce restrictive behaviors or intensify binge urge later on. And the challenges can also make cooking and cleaning overwhelming. We're not sure when to start and what's available. And people may also impulsively eat large amount of food in response to emotional overwhelm, and they feel like they're unable to pause and recognize what's happening until afterwards. Also, unattended and unresolved emotions lead to ED behaviors as a coping mechanism. We feel like if we consume a lot of food or if we don't consume food now, um, it will make the emotion better or it will make us feel numb. So people use it as a coping mechanism. And given the high comorbidity of EF problems and neurodivergency, we have another page about what can happen when they meet together. So sensory differences can make the environment, experiences, or food intolerable. And also sensory processing differences, such as people might have strong sensitivities or low interoceptive awareness. So that's the awareness of internal body sensations like hunger, fullness, and pain that can also complicate eating. And also, if you're taking medications, such as stimulants for ADHD, that can also impact appetite and food intake. And also, if we're labeled a picky eater, that will also make the feeding process, and we will also face forceful eating practice that will also make things even harder. And as we are talking about neurodivergent now, a lot of it will be around sensory differences and sensory needs. So there's actually a neurodivergent group at Sheena's place, and I was shadowing this group for this season. And there was one time that we talk about sensory needs and some sensory differences. So that is actually one of the most engaging and strength-based sessions that I had before. So what we shared then was about fidget toys, weighted blankets, and some of us have weighted toys. We see a lot of different kinds of weighted toys and also people's preferences of sensory stimuli. Okay, so we're now getting into some skills and tips. So before we get into that, we are aware that executive function challenges can make it really hard to reach into our toolbox anytime and use the skills. Sometimes we feel like we have some skills, we have the tools in the box, but we just cannot make ourselves do it. So we are here to offer a few options that can potentially make things easier, but if you find some of the skills overwhelming, please do not use them. Or if you can find your own way to adjust the skill and you only use the part of it, or you only use the key concept of it, it's also great. And you've probably heard of, or you're probably very familiar with some of the skills from previous ED intervention received. So we are choosing to talk about these skills because they have their own way of relating to executive function. So first, we are talking about the structured eating. This means create a consistent eating schedule across the day, including meals, snacks, and also plan ahead for meal preparation time. So here we have an example of how it may look like, and you can adjust according to your schedule. So this schedule eating can be especially helpful for people who feel less clear or less reliable hunger cues. So instead of relying on internal signals, we are using some external structure to guide eating. And from a EF perspective, this reduces the need for constant decision making. So you don't always need to ask yourself, do I eat now? Or what should I eat? When should I eat? So the structure is already in place. And another important idea here is that action can come before motivation. So you don't have to feel ready or motivated to eat. So for people with EF challenges, we constantly tell ourselves, I will do it when I have enough motivation. I'll do it when I'm ready. But it's possible that we're not going to be ready within the limited time, but we still need to do things even we are not ready. So sometimes if we have the clear structure here, it can help us regulate the body and the mind over time. The structured eating is commonly suggested for eating management. It can reduce decision making, but we are also aware that that can also make things harder because we need to follow the schedule. So for people with executive function challenges, following a fixed schedule can sometimes feel very overwhelming or stressful. And it may feel like there are just too many steps to manage, or there's a pressure to do it right. So if someone is already struggling with some EF challenges like task initiating, like time management, or difficulties shift between tasks, or having trouble shift attention, having a strict schedule can sometimes increase anxiety rather than reduce it. So we also have some different ways to support this, and some of these tools can also be applied to some other areas of supporting EF. So one example we have here is body doubling. That means eating with someone else or even just have someone else present with you. And maybe you don't like eating with people, that's also okay. You can choose to make a phone call or text your friend, say that, hey, it's time that we can eat. And also another helpful tool is using a calendar or a timetable. Having meals scheduled and visible can reduce the need to constantly decide what to do next, which can lower the executive load. And also visualization. It can also be useful. For example, having visual cues in your environment, like having sticker notes on your fridge to remind what's inside. And I've also heard a way to adjust how we put stuff in the fridge. Normally, we tend to put drinks and cans on the fridge door and vegetables in the drawers because that's how fridge is designed. But it can maybe be helpful if we move the vegetables to a more visible space, like we move the vegetables to the door, so that it's easier to see and remember. And also these tools can be transferred into other areas of life, like body doubling. I find it very helpful when I need to do a task and I just can't get started. I will call my friend and we will maybe meet at a library and we will do things together. And also for visualization, I find it helpful to have sticky notes maybe everywhere to remind me what's done, what's not done, and the deadline of the tasks. And here we have another tool that can help with decision making. We sometimes know that we need to eat, but what to eat and what do I want now? It's kind of a hard question. So this can help us decide what to eat and how can I make my environment more comfortable. This source is from NEDIC, Neurodivergent Toolkit, and inside that website, they also have information about neuroaffirming care and some practice of self-advocacy. So for the nourishing experience chart, we can think about what feels better for our body in that moment. Do I prefer something crunchy or something smooth? Or do I want to try something new or I want to stay with something familiar? Or do I want something cold or something warm? And also this same thing applies to the environment. Some people may prefer quiet and less stimulation, while others may find it easier to eat with some background noise or with someone else. Or you can also choose if I want background music for now, or a video or movie. And also coming back to the sensory stimuli, people might find it helpful if they have a fidget toy or some weighted toys with them. So here the goal is to make the experience feel as supportive and as manageable as possible. And then we are getting into another skill called breaking tasks into small steps. It's about breaking overwhelming tasks in small and concrete steps. So a key part of it is breaking down the starting point. Often the hardest part is just getting started. So we want that first step to be as small and as doable as possible. It can also help to focus only on the next steps rather than thinking about everything that needs to happen. And also, if we limit choice, it's when there's too many options, it can increase overwhelming and make decision making harder. So, if we keep it to two or three options, we can make it easier to move forward. So the goal here is to make the task as clear and manageable as possible. We can start by defining one specific task and then we break down into steps. So, for example, if we think about something like recovery, it can feel really big and really overwhelming. But if we frame it as I need to recover or I need to fix this ED symptom, it can feel like almost impossible to begin. So instead, we can try breaking it down to even more manageable steps. Like an example here will be like, it will be really nice if I can seek help for some of my ED symptoms this week. So the idea here is that each step is small enough that it doesn't require a lot of motivation and it can make it easier to get started and can gradually build a sense of control and success. And building on that, we also find that this mindset of breaking tasks into smaller steps is also super related to perfectionism. Also, the fear of not doing the thing exactly the way we wish it to be, and getting overwhelmed or scared by the whole journey of completing the goal. So, we also want to introduce a similar skill called mini goals, and we can apply it to anywhere in our life when we find that we seems to be dealing with a goal that's too big. So the origin of mini goals is that we often unknowingly trained to be perfectionists by copying the goal size of the people around us. So when we see from the internet, other people's goal may feel like my goal is to read 100 books this year, or my goal is to lose weight or something. So when we reach the goal, the number, that's called success. And this implies that smaller progress is not good enough, and that can lead to huge amount of stress. So a mini goal is intentionally small, and it's small enough that you can still do it on a tired day, or you can still do it when you feel low motivation. So it's better to take a few minutes to complete, and we can do it in different ways and different locations. And here is a 2-minute rule, which means that if a task take only 2 minutes or less to complete, we can skip the overthink part. We can just do it instead of getting stuck in planning or trying to do it perfectly. So if we have a task that is smaller than 2 minutes, or you can set a time if you feel like 1 minute is good, you can also make it 1 minute. So if we have a task that is so small, we can just let us stand up and do it, and we can tell ourselves it's just 2 minutes, and after that I can get back to what I want to do or what I enjoy or what I am doing now. So, some examples for here is that, for example, my goal is to read more books this year. So, a mini goal will look like my goal is probably to read for 2 minutes or 5 minutes every day so that I can just actually complete it. Or in terms of ED recovery, it can look like a huge goal is to reduce binge eating. So if we make it into a mini goal, it will look like I can choose a distress tolerance skill to practice, which is less than 2 minutes. And also the mini goals is for long-term goals that do not have a clear end goal. If we break, I need to read 100 books into smaller goals, that will be still too overwhelming. So the goal here is to set us up for success, and we can check it off every day, and we are helping ourselves experience more and more success. And as we get started, it's creating momentum. And it will be better if we make it ordinary because when we make something very special, it feels very hard. And it somehow indicate that we need a lot of preparation to do it and we need to do it well. So if we try to make it routine, it sounds a lot easier. So the key idea here is that we make the first step so small and it's doable even our entire day. And once we take that small steps, we get a proof that, yeah, I can start, I can complete my goal for today and I can keep going on. So this proof make the next steps easier. And over time, action become more familiar and less scary. And maybe after that, motivation tends to show up like a positive reinforcement. And then we are getting to our final set of skills, which are distress tolerance skills. It's particularly useful when emotions feel overwhelming. So when distress is really high, our executive function often becomes less effective and it becomes harder to think clearly, make decisions, or regulate urges. So many people will experience binge eating or purging at this moment, and it's possible that people will use some ED symptoms as coping mechanism here. So in these moments, we can try to help our nervous system settle a little bit so that we can regain some capacity. So one thing we can do here is just to take a pause and which will prevent you from doing whatever emotions you want to do and whatever tasks you want to do. So some helpful resources for distress tolerance include strategies for ACT, acceptance and commitment therapy, mindfulness, and also DBT. So what we are showing here on the right is a DBT skill called accept. It's an example and it will include different ways to shift attention and create some space for the intense emotion to settle. So, uh, if we start from the top, we have A for actions first. That means doing something that requires attention, like we can read, we can write a journal, or we can do something creative. So the goal here is to shift your focus away from distress. And this can be really helpful if your mind is stuck or you feel like you're spinning in your head. And the second one, C for contributing. This is about focusing on someone else or something other than yourself. So this can include checking in with a friend uh, or offering some help to your friend. So this can shift attention outwards and sometimes reduce the intensity of your own emotion. And then we have C comparison, which is put our situation into perspective by comparing to something worse. So that can show up like remembering a time when you're in more pain or think about someone who has worse feelings. And also emotions for E. This is about trying to create a different emotion that can compete with the current one. So, for example, it can feel like if we're feeling low, we can try to watch some TV shows that are really funny. And it can also show up like listening to calming music when you're feeling anxious. And then P for pushing away. It means temporarily settling the distress aside, like we can imagine putting the distress in a box. Uh, it's not about avoidance, but it can create some space when we feel like things are getting too intense. And then we have T for thoughts. It's around using your mind in a different way, like counting backwards or doing something mentally engaging to interrupt the distressing thoughts. And then we have S sensations. It's about using physical sensations like holding something cold or taking a really hot shower to help regulate emotional intensity through body. And as we talk about these distress tolerance skills, it can be really normal if we are trying some distress tolerance skills, but at last still engage in eating disorder behaviors anyways. So even if that happens, you're still practicing your ability to resist impulses, and you might find that you're able to delay or pause for longer, or even interrupt symptoms sometimes. So it's okay that when you're trying it for the first couple of times, it seems that there's not a clear improvement, or it seems that the ED disorder still occur. That's totally okay, and that's totally normal. And if the whole distress tolerance skill finds you will find it too overwhelming or too many steps, you can choose whatever you like. And also coming back to the stimuli, you can maybe choose a sensation that you like. You can just hold an ice cube or just try some part of it, or you can just try pause for the moment and stay with the emotion. And then we will get to our final part about some resources that where we can get more support. And Minna will talk about it.
So, today's session was really just kind of an introduction to this connection and overlap between executive functioning and eating disorders. So you might be walking away from tonight with more questions or wondering where you can get some more support. So here's a couple ideas of places you can go if this is something that you're realizing that you are struggling with and you'd like some more support with it. So one resource we always like to share is NEDIC, the National Eating Disorder Information Center. They have a referral database of service providers that are all specialized or trained in eating disorders. So that's a really useful resource to check out if you're looking for individual support. We also have a couple of Sheena's Place groups that cover some topics related to executive functioning. So one of those groups Yuxuan mentioned earlier, with the neurodivergent support group, certainly talks a lot about executive functioning in different ways. But we also have a new skills group called Everyday Skills that approaches eating disorders from an occupational therapy lens. And that also, I would say, covers some executive functioning questions. It's unfortunately full this season, but we'll likely run it again. So you can keep your eye out for that one. And if you want more support with distress tolerance skills, you might look into things like ACT or DBT, either at Sheena's Place or at other eating disorder organizations. Another resource that people don't always think about, but can sometimes be really useful for eating disorders and executive functioning, this overlap, is looking into occupational therapy. Occupational therapy is support that often spends time thinking about what your physical environment is, the space that you're in, and talking about things like routines. And those are all things that can be challenging with executive functioning difficulties. And many occupational therapists have experience with executive functioning. You'll just want to look for one that also has experience with eating disorders. So the NEDIC referral database would be a good place to look. Same thing with therapists. There's a lot of therapists and psychotherapists have experience with this. You just might want to ask your provider if they have experience with both executive functioning and eating disorders if you find this is something that you're struggling with. Okay, I think we're going to end the recording here and go into a Q&A. So